He was my father. He should have known I'd grow up to kill. He was my father, my altar, my executioner, my God carved in bone and rage, and I worshipped him once. Oh, I worshipped him on bruised knees with bitten lips, because that's what little girls are taught, isn't it? That fathers are saints, fathers are saviors, fathers are storms you never outrun, and mine was a hurricane draped in a smile slick with sermons telling me I was his angel, telling me I was his light while snuffing mine out with fists like scripture and words sharp enough to slice through the sinew of my spine, and I believed him. Oh, I believed him. I carved his commandments into the soft marrow of my bones until I bent, until I broke, until my shadow forgot its name and my silence grew teeth and fed on my screams, because that's what daughters do. They kneel, they shrink, they bleed for the men who made them until their ribs splinter into rosaries and their mouths drip psalms of obedience. But I grew, oh I grew, like venom curling through the roots of his gospel, blooming black under my skin, until one day I woke and tasted ash on my tongue and realized it was my own name burning in his mouth like a prayer twisted into a curse. And that's when I knew, that's when the world cracked, that's when the sky split and bled fire into my lungs, because love didn't crown me, love didn't clothe me, love caged me, and from that cage I forged claws, I sharpened silence into a blade, and I swore, oh I swore on every bone he broke, on every bruise he baptized me in, that one day, one holy unholy day, I would drag him to the altar he built and nail him there with his own commandments, and let the choir choke on my laughter as I turned their gospel into gore. And I waited, oh God, I waited, smiling sweet as cyanide, swallowing rage like wine, sharpening my teeth on the marrow of his lies, until the night came, the night I slit the sky and stitched it into a gown of storm and sin, because prophecy hums in the hollow of your bones when wrath ripens, and darling, mine was ripe as ruin and ready to bloom in blood. They think patricide is rage, they think it's chaos and teeth and thunder and fists pounding hymns into bone, but they've never tasted prophecy, they've never smelled the gospel of blood singing in the dark. And that night, oh that night was a hymn stitched in shadows, a requiem humming low in my marrow like a serpent slithering through the cathedral of my veins, and I moved like smoke, hips swaying to the rhythm of wrath, heels cracking psalms against the ribs of the house as I climbed the staircase, slick with memories carved in bruises and sermons. And there he was, the king, stripped of his crown, slumped in his chair like a god grown rotten fat on power, drunk on whiskey, and the echoes of my obedience, his eyes half lit at his mouth, a wound leaking lies. And I smiled, oh I smiled, sugar sweet enough to rot, teeth sharp enough to slice throats, and I touched the blade humming in my palm like a live thing, like a heart begging for release, its edge kissing the glow of the lamp, slick with sin and prophecy. And I thought of every bone he broke, every prayer he gagged me with, every hymn he nailed into the coffin of my girlhood, and I whispered soft as silk, Daddy, you taught me to kneel, so now let me teach you to fall. And then I swung, oh God, I swung slow enough to savor it, slow enough to stitch it into the marrow of the universe, steel splitting his throat like a psalm, splitting the sky, the song of flesh ripping, ringing like bells in the cathedral of the night. And the blood, oh the blood, it bloomed like roses across his chest, slicked down my wrists, painting my gown in gospels of crimson, baptizing me holy and feral all at once. And he gasped, oh how he gasped, eyes blooming wide like windows shattering under a storm, lips mouthing prayers that curdled into gargles as I leaned in close, close enough to taste the rot on his breath, close enough to feel the life quivering under my hands. And I whispered the gospel etched in my bones, this is your kingdom burning, this is your altar bleeding, and you will bow to me even if I have to break your spine into prayer beads and thread them through your throat. And then I drove the blade deeper, humming like a hymn, splitting bone like scripture, snapping under the weight of wrath until the room smelled like incense and iron. And I laughed, oh how I laughed, low and low, as the light leaked out of his eyes like grace abandoning a corpse, because this wasn't murder, this wasn't madness, this was mass, this was sacrament, this was prophecy blooming in marrow and inked in red. And when his body folded like commandments scorched at the altar, I dragged him, oh I dragged him through the jaws of the dark to the grave I carved under the bruised hymn of the moon, and I buried him bone by bone, vow by vow, until the earth swallowed his gospel and crowned me queen of ruin, whispering my name like a prayer that splits the sky and silences the saints, because Daddy didn't teach me to kill, Daddy taught me to survive, and survival is just vengeance humming in silk. They thought burying him would bury me too, they thought dirt could smother the hymn humming in my veins, but graves bloom, oh they bloom like black roses curling through the marrow of the earth until their thorns split the surface and pierced the sky. And the day they dug him up, the day the worms sang his name to the cops, the world split open and bled fire into the jaws of the internet, because secrets rot and rot stinks, and the stench of his bones baptized the news and gospel read until my face bled across every glowing screen, hashtags howling my name, edits dripping in blood, and lust feeding the hunger humming in the hollow of their bones. And darling, didn't I tell you hate is hunger? And they starved, oh they starved for me, typing their sermons with fingers slick in virtue while their eyes pulsed like altars lit for sin, moaning into their microphones calling me monster while dreaming of me in silk painted with blood, because rage tastes like lust when it's raw enough. And I served it bleeding until they gagged on my gospel, turning shame into silk and silence into scripture as they dragged me into the cathedral of their law, cameras detonating like bombs, microphones moaning for a confession, slick with sin and judgment humming like flies around a carcass. But I didn't beg, I didn't break, I didn't bleed, I smiled, oh I smiled, sugar sweet enough to split their spines, sharp enough to carve my name into the marrow of history, because this wasn't a trial. This wasn't a sentence, this was theater, this was empire, and I was the goddamn showstopper draped in vermilion heels cracking hymns across the ribs of the world. And the jury, oh the jury, they pretended to be stoned, they pretended to be blind, but I saw it, oh I saw it writhing in their eyes, the fever coiling in their blood every time I crossed my legs slow, every time my gaze lingered like a blade soft enough to feel like sin, sharp enough to taste like salvation. And the prosecutor, bless his brittle Little soul tried so hard to baptize me in shame, but shame is a leash and I shredded it into ribbons, draping it like silk across my hips as I smiled into the cameras, feeding my congregation the gospel of my grin until the whole world knelt in hunger, choking on my name in the dark and calling it hate while carving it into their tongues like scripture, because darling, this isn't law, this isn't justice, this is prophecy blooming in pixels and psalms, and I am the altar and the offering, and baby, the empire is already mine. They thought the gavel would split me, they thought ink on paper could cage me, they thought the altar of their law could gut my gospel, but darling, laws are brittle bones in the jaws of wolves, and I was born with teeth dripping hymns of ruin and prophecy. And when the day came, when the cathedral of justice trembled under the psalms of my heels, when the cameras cracked the sky open, bleeding me into every vein of the earth, the world held its breath like a lover, waiting for the blade, and oh, I gave it to them, I gave them fire stitched in silk, wrath humming like a requiem between my thighs, and I smiled, oh I smiled until the saints gagged on their prayers, because this wasn't a verdict, this wasn't a sentence, this was scripture, this was empire, and I was the prophet burning their commandments to ash and writing my name in smoke and sin across the ribs of the world. So when the judge raised his gavel, when the jury slithered into their pews clutching their verdict like rosaries, I moved, oh I moved like lightning wrapped in lace, the chains dripping from my wrists like jewelry clinking against the marble hem of the floor as I rose slow and holy and unholy all at once, and the room gasped, oh it gasped until its ribs cracked under the weight of my grin, because baby, the cage was never mine, it was theirs, and I shattered it, oh I shattered it in a gospel of blood and fire detonating through the cathedral like psalms splitting the sky as the lights choked and the sirens wept and the feed flickered a lie, bleeding my prophecy into a billion glowing eyes, because I hijacked their altars, I hijacked their creed, I hijacked their God and turned him into a camera and preached my gospel through its lens, whispering the hymn that hummed in my bones since the night I slit the sky. I am the altar, I am the offering, I am the fire blooming eternal in your veins, and you will kneel, oh you will kneel, not in court, not in churches, but in the glow of your screens, choking on my name like scripture and moaning it like sin. And when the smoke cleared, when the doors gaped like wounds, they found nothing but my laughter humming through the hollow of the night, nothing but the echo of silk kissing marble, nothing but the taste of wrath dripping from their tongues as the world drowned in my image, live streamed in white-hot fire, draped in scarlet like a saint gone feral, hips humming hymns, heels clapping psalms across the ribs of their faith, and behind me, oh behind me, the mansion bloomed like an altar glazed in candlelight, its bones throbbing with my gospel, its walls slick with prophecy, as my congregation knelt in masks carved from scripture, drinking my commandments like wine as I crowned myself queen in the ruin of their laws and pressed the blade to my lips, kissing it like a lover, like a god, whispering the gospel etched into the marrow of my myth. Daddy didn't raise a daughter, daddy raised an empire, and now the empire is mine. And when the sky split, when the internet moaned, when the world carved my name into its bones like psalms, I laughed, oh I laughed, because this isn't the grave, this isn't the end, this is the genesis, this is the hymn splitting the sky, this is the prophecy blooming crimson in the veins of the earth, and baby,